For joining us. Let's first look at this statement that Trump has made, saying that this deal is done. Important factors including the sale of rare earth minerals from China. How significant is this in the relationship between the two countries, given the fractious nature in recent months?
I think that we have got to wait for the formal approval by President Xi. Because if we look at what the United States is most worried about is the rare earths, because the rare earths in question affect not only trade, but a great deal of the American military equipment, including F-35 fighters. A lot of them have rare earth embedded in them, and China controls 70% of the world production and 90% of the world processing in general. But for particular rare earths, for example, salarium, which is used in F-35 fighters and on missiles, these extremely heat-resistant magnets, China is the only producer in the world. So I think that China holds a trump card, as it were, in the negotiation. But I think that the framework agreement somehow managed to secure China's concession in relaxing some of this. But I think that the exchange must be to what extent are the tariffs on China lowered? To what extent is China allowed access to certain key technologies or chips? To what extent, for example, is China's AI development affected by whatever restrictions are in place? While Trump, of course, he just looks at mainly rare earths because he's obsessed with it. Because don't forget that even on day one in the White House, he already wanted wanted to control Greenland. Mainly because of the rare earths there, and also he wants the rare earths in Ukraine. So rare earth now has become his obsession, and provided the trade framework agreement contains some rare earth concessions, Trump is very prompt in declaring the deal is done. But I think that it really depends on a formal endorsement or formal approval by President Xi before we can really say, well, there is the deal is signed and delivered.
Yes, absolutely. And Andrew, of course, after the previous meeting in Geneva, before the one that took place in London over the past couple of days, there were allegations of violations of that agreement. Do you think that the relationship here is still strained and there could still be further issues moving forward, given the fact, as you've mentioned, that this hasn't been confirmed yet by the Chinese president?
Well, I think that what has not been confirmed by the Chinese president is not an indication that the Chinese side is dithering, but of course it requires a very careful assessment overall, because the methods of negotiations are very different between the Western kind of method in general and the Chinese general approach to negotiations. The Chinese always approach negotiations holistically. In other words, even though if there are 10 clauses, even though 9 clauses agreed, it doesn't mean that the whole thing is agreed, because any one clause is not agreed would affect the agreement of the other clauses. So that's the usual Chinese way of conducting negotiations. The whole thing must be looked at as a whole. Whereas the Trump administration seems just to zero in on rare earths, and they say, "Oh wow, well, rare earths. Well, we've got some concessions. Well, let's call it a day." Well, this is far from the truth. But I think that both sides want to negotiate, and of course the United States just want to up the ante in the beginning in order to get the maximum gain for the United States. But China is not covering behind in front of Americans bullying. So I think that there still requires some sort of process on the Chinese side, but it doesn't mean that both sides do not want to negotiate. If both sides really want some sort of a deal that could make the relationship more sustainable. But I think that the details have got to be looked at firstly by the Chinese side before you can say that everything is done.
Yes, and looking at Trump's post on Truth Social, he's laid out some figures. As you've said already, we're waiting on President Xi to confirm those. Also, Trump himself needs to give the all clear. But he's saying that the US are going to have 55% tariffs on China, and China's getting 10% tariffs. This, of course, a shift from that agreement that was reached in Geneva. Do you think this is Trump signalling that it's a win for the US, and is that more symbolic than actually being something of value in this instance?
Well, I mean, if you look at how the tariffs are calculated, there are lots of confusion there. For example, oftentimes the American statement ignored the so-called 10% tariffs right from the very start on fentanyl, using the excuse of the fentanyl just to impose 10% tariffs. And then there is another so-called reciprocal tariffs. There are all sorts of numbers flying around. At the end of the day, there is an imbalance as seen by the United States in the trade, and the Trump administration thinks that just to restore the balance, to reduce the trade deficit, they need a level of tariffs regardless of other negotiations. Now, how much that is remains to be seen. So I think that we should not be fixating on certain numbers. And I think what the most important thing in reading this is to wait for what the response from the Chinese side after President Xi has been thoroughly briefed and has agreed or otherwise the deal as a whole.
Yes, and Andrew, as we bring an end to our discussion, I do want to briefly touch on one further point from Trump's tweet, talking about allowing Chinese students to use our colleges and universities, he says in brackets as well, which has always been good with me. This, of course, after controversy with the US administration and Harvard, specifically at points involving Chinese students as well. Do you think that part of this deal was Chinese students in the United States, and how could that impact those relations between the Trump administration and US colleges?
Sorry, you're asking me?
Yes, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that the Harvard the student thing does not depend on the tariffs. It really is affected by restrictions on Chinese visas and then investigations even against long-time students or researchers. The suspicion that every Chinese student, especially in the elite school like Harvard, could be a potential spy. There is a Chinese saying which speaks to this kind of mindset, which that to a suspicious mind, every curved shadow looks like a snake. Well, that's a long time Chinese saying. I think that precisely speaks this kind of mindset. But I think that there is a lot of backlash in the United States, and there is a student protest, and also even parties on both sides. Maybe some of their party members are protesting against this attack on Harvard.
Yes.
And of course, the Harvard University is staying up to the Trump bullying. And then behind it all, I mean, the Harvard, the elite institutions is really what drives American first, because not trade, because the Americans no longer the world's biggest trader, not manufacture. Americans no longer manufacture by any kind of measurement compared with China. But I think American strength lies it is a freedom of educational freedom.
Yes, Andrew, I'm really sorry to have to cut you off. We are unfortunately